Well. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Struggle Session special live edition. As you see, for the first time ever, live in studio guests on the eastern wing of Struggle Session. Jack has people over a lot over in LA. Jack has people over a lot, but we had to do something over here in DC.
Yeah, we had to show up.
The East Coast has something to say.
And we had to say it's spooky season. That's what we really had to say.
And it's so spooky night. It's October 1st, so I had to get some spooky guests on, some spooky people.
Well, thanks for having us, Leslie.
Yeah, Kate and Harrison from Spooky Pod. Thank you so much for coming to my home. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Very nice. I know our listeners may know I've been kind of lonely these past couple of weeks. My partner's been out of town, so it's nice to have some people come over, and I really appreciate y'all coming all the way out here and hanging out and on a podcast. Doing it old school. This is how you used to podcast. You know? In person, none of this remote stuff, none of this Zoom stuff. This is how we used to do it back in the territories, back in the old days. Okay, this is real old school podcasting.
It really is. It's great to do it. And I'm so happy to be here in person.
Yeah.
Doing it.
Oh, they're saying. Oh, sorry. The music was played. Sorry about that, folks. Y'all can hear us now. We were just shooting the shit. You'll hear it on the podcast. We recorded it. You'll hear it on the podcast. Sorry, the music is still playing. How y'all doing, folks? Thank you for joining us tonight on Struggle Session. Live guests Kate and Harrison from Spooky Pod. If you didn't hear that, and we're here to talk about some spooky stuff for Halloween.
October 1st, baby.
I'm very excited for this. How does this Halloween feel spookier than normal?
Oh God, I want to say maybe not normal, but from past Halloweens, yes. Because we can actually do spooky things.
Oh, from
now.
last Halloween.
Yes.
Because last year it was like we couldn't do anything, and now it's like we can go to the haunted houses, we can go to the movie theater,
yes,
and do all the Halloween stuff that we love to do, like trick or treat.
Do you think it's actually? But you generally think of being social activities as less scary. Being around people
That's
as
true.
less scary. Weren't we more scared when we were all alone by ourselves last year?
In quarantine, it's terrifying. Yeah.
It feels spooky. I think this Halloween feels spooky because everybody is pretty feral and starting to interact with each other.
Yes. That's the danger. It's it's been a feral. I think that's fair to say.
Howling at them,
Yes, they've been people have been locked up for a year, and they're not coming out to be always be friendly and super kind. They're freaking out. They're wilding out. They're like Jason out there.
Yeah, we're gonna see a werewolf this year for sure. We're gonna see the first werewolf ever.
It's so funny you mention that because you Spooky Pod. You cover a lot of stuff, but you do a lot of true crime, and I love true crime. I love true crime. On Struggle Session, we talk about the fictional monsters a lot, but true crime is pretty interesting too. And this is something I just learned from a book called "The History of Serial Killers." Over 1,000 people on the record books have been convicted of what are officially called werewolf murders, because the idea was, and this is from hundreds of years ago, but the idea was this was an actual legal precedent. It wasn't literally you were a werewolf. It's just that you murdered somebody, just a blitz attack or something like that. You would literally be called a werewolf. They didn't mean it. They didn't think people were actually werewolves all the time, but it was more something had gotten into you.
Right.
Some kind of snap.
Yeah, it was overkill, all that stuff. And so they're on the books. I had no idea this was a thing, a werewolf killing. That would be what you were charged with. Harrison, you've been charged with a second-degree werewolfing.
On someone's death certificate, does it say death by werewolf?
Death
by
werewolf.
1,000 on 1,000 people's different death certificates, it says death by werewolf attack?
Or because it was a full moon or something, and they just went crazy, and they were
Well, who knows? There was all kind of allegations of paranormal stuff going on back in the day, witches, etc.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I like this book that I'm reading because it dives into the fact that our idea of detective work, of what the police actually do, and how there are these people who are super smart and they go out and they solve and find crimes. That all is from fiction, actually.
Right.
Criminal Minds.
Like that started off the use of deductive reasoning. Like there were no detectives in like real life basically before Sherlock Holmes. There are a few other stuff, but like they got the idea of like hunting people and finding people and using all these investigating clues to figure out who did it, because before cops would basically just be like, okay, like where's the nearest black guy, where's the nearest gay guy, that's where we're going to put in jail for this crime.
Right. 100%.
And then they just started being like, I guess we'll like be a regular gumshoe, write our own little novel based on the things that we're seeing. Because that's where you start to see these kind of grandiose stories, right, start to emerge about like where cases, clues start getting put together, etc. And that's where stuff starts getting messy because people start looking for things to fill the narratives and stuff like that too, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and really it did start with narrative. Think about it. This is very relevant now with the Gabby Petito murder investigation, and how it's, like people were talking about how all these TikTokers are covering it and all, and the newspaper was mad about that. But when in the 1800s, who was investigating the murder? It was like the lowest of the low, like journalists, like the scumbag journalists would be the ones actually trying to figure out who murdered this person, because the police sometimes would just like not want to deal with it or not know how to deal with it. And so a lot of the early, detective police homicide work was done by journalists, not police.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't even know if I would call the TikTokers like they call them like armchair detectives and whatnot, but I think that they played a huge role in like getting the case out there, because I know like I first saw it. First heard about it on TikTok.
You can use your mic closer.
Oh, sure.
I think you let me make sure.
It's
Oh yeah, just a little bit closer. Okay. Yeah, this one's a little bit. Those are quiet. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I first heard about that story on TikTok, and like, I don't know, like the TikTokers make some good points with the case, I guess, but a lot of it is like heavy speculation.
Yes.
And reaching.
Yes. Lots like it's I don't like I my first instinct is to say, no, this is bad, this is horrible, but I'm thinking about, if you believe in police abolition, how would you deal with something like this other than regular people trying to share information?
Yep.
Right.
And I'm sure it'll be messy to start out with, but this is kind of how it has to go, how it works. And I know you look at all these cases on your show, Spooky Pod, and you look at the serial killer cases. And for people who don't know, this is how the majority. I've done a lot of reading on like John Douglas, who is the prototype for the FBI profiler, and he's like Jack Crawford. He's literally the guy that Jack Crawford is based off of, and he's very proud of this. He's very arrogant.
Yeah, did you read Mindhunter?
Yes.
Yes, that book is like, it's good, but you can tell he's
I've done basically all his books. I think I've read 5 or 6 of them, and he's a very interesting guy. You have to read everything with a grain of salt. Like, you have to do all true crime. One thing I like about true crime is that all the writers get kind of messy and personal, so you can't take their word for it.
Yes.
Even the book I'm reading, even though it has all these factual documents, the centerpiece, like, he's always like, well, people think that this case was about this, but it actually turns out that that's not true. This case was about this, but it actually turns out that that's not true. And he has all his facts lined up, but then in the middle of the book, there's an entire chapter about a serial killer he is personally interviewing, and he is saying, oh, this guy actually killed 60 people. I'm like, dude, you are going to be like corrected like those other people. But I like that, because like, it's just regular people trying to put it together. But I digress. But the thing, I forget what I was going to say about that, why I brought that book up, but maybe I think I was just saying the thing about whenever you're looking at these serial killer cases. Oh yeah, the number one advice that someone like John Douglas, who worked for the FBI, gives, you know, these Mindhunter shows and Criminal Minds especially, make it look like the FBI flies around on a private jet arresting serial killers.
Wheels up in 20.
Yeah, wheels up, but that's not what happens. What they do is they get an email or a fax from a police department, and then they look at the facts of the case, and then they tell them, all right, you got serial killers on your hands, and what you should do is tell the public that there's a serial killer going around killing people so that they can go find this person, because that's the only way you're going to catch him.
Yeah, because you got to get the word out every time.
And wouldn't you know it, about 70% of the time, the cops say, we rather not. We rather.
Yeah. And they think it's like a tactic too, to like either, I don't know, sometimes they don't want like the serial killer to know that they know it's a serial killer that's out there. So
they don't want to give that glory and that like
well, no, they're like, we're going to keep this close to our chest first. And then also, like, we don't want to cause the public, like,
panic,
any
like that,
stress.
Like, well, what they don't want is people yelling at them. I think that's the number one thing. And obviously, when it comes, if the people being killed are, you know, unhoused or sex workers, the police, like, really just don't want to deal with it.
Oh,
and
no.
And, you know, I think we have talked about the incident on the show many times, the Jeffrey Dahmer case.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people know that at one point one of the victims ran screaming. Oh, and for people, this is a spooky stream, folks. We are talking about true crime.
Yeah.
So please, this is your content advisory. All right. But so I think most people know that, you know, this child ran naked and screaming and bloody out of Jeffrey Dahmer's house, saying he's trying to kill him, or he didn't speak English well, but clearly in distress. And there were these black women in the neighborhood trying to help him, and the cops show up and walk him back to Jeffrey Dahmer's house,
give him right back to Dahmer,
and he murders him. Did you know that actually happened twice
with Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yes. The time.
Wait, I didn't know that. No.
Yes, I figured it out because I was hearing the story told, and I'm like, oh, I know are the details, but it turns out that the cops who actually arrested him when they were given their interview said that, oh, we were actually going to do the same thing when they found this guy stumbling around outside. I think he got in a car accident or something, and they were just trying to find out where he lives, and they were bringing him back to Dahmer's house. Even when they smelled the decaying corpses, that did not deter them. They actually thought, and we know this, they thought, oh, this is just one of these, you know, gay dramas. Even after the guy was like, this guy is going to kill me, and he said he was going to eat my heart, the cops were like, oh, that's just those gays, you know, they're so
kinky,
so dramatic. And only when they saw the photographs of actual body parts and found the body parts in the apartment did they say, all right, we're actually going to arrest this Jeffrey Dahmer
And that
guy.
wasn't like that long ago.
No, this was
happening.
The 90s.
Yeah,
the 90s.
It was not that long ago.
Yeah, and so and think about all the, you know, scenes from movies we've seen of serial killers being caught by this heroic detective who's risking their life.
Do you know how the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, was caught?
Oh, please remind me.
Oh my gosh. So that is my all-time favorite story ever, and I think it is what got me interested in true crime. So basically, they like knew who he was. They had his picture up. He was trying to run away, and then he ran away, and these people recognized him, and they just start shouting, "Killer, killer." He starts running. People start chasing him down the street. Soon the whole town joins in, chases him down the street, like tackles him to the ground, beating him. Like the cops had to stop the public because they were going to kill him. So it was just like this whole community just like came together to catch the serial killer and just like beat the crap out of him. And it's so good.
I mean, yeah, that's how you gotta do it.
That.
That's the only way.
That's
the
community.
Yeah, it has to be a community based, because the reason why these people, why serial killers, during their heyday were so effective is they were either attacking people who were isolated, didn't have family, or single women who are at home alone during the day while their their husbands might be out.
Right.
There's all sorts of, they just are elderly people too, elderly people who people might not be checking in on.
Yeah, Night Stalker did that.
Yeah, and they target the vulnerable, and people always assume that we need the police to protect us from them. But when you look at the actual cases of serial killers, those are the worst cases for any cop. Just on the basic level, like, the number one way that cops solve a murder is that they find out who was mad at the person that they knew.
Exactly. Yeah, who had some kind of personal vendetta.
And it took, decades for cops to even like wrap their heads around the idea of murdering somebody that you don't know, which is what a serial killer is. And so with all these cases, like, you see people being murdered, and they would like arrest the boyfriends, and sometimes the boyfriends would even end up like convicted, because 90% of the time it's the boyfriend.
So it's the husband,
It's the husband, it's the boyfriend, it's the ex, it's et cetera, et cetera. And they're just like completely baffled unless the victim and the murderer have been photographed threatening to kill each other. That's basically like the number one way that cops can solve a crime. But when it comes to these big cases that fascinate the public, they're absolutely awful at it. And really only the public solves these.
I know. I think in like pretty much every episode that we do, I bring up how the police like fucked up a situation. Like, every time, I think.
Well, and I'm sure there's also like countless unconnected, serial killer cases out there that are just like have been gone unnoticed because of the people that policing in this country like naturally tries to exclude.
Yes.
Like directly, like, if it's not like white and cis, like essentially policing in this country, or like wealthy to some extent, even.
Yeah, like they're so like, and people just have this idea that if you like true crime, what it turns you into is someone who wants to build your home, your fortress in the suburbs, and you're immediately scared of every person. You think you're going to be murdered constantly, and it doesn't have to be the way. Every time I listen to true crime, it just makes me relax and like think the cops are stupid. Like, it doesn't stress me.
Relaxed, and the cops still stupid.
Yes. And even when I just put on like Forensic Files, right, which is kind of the default, which is kind of the default baseline show, like, you can sit there and watch like maybe 5 episodes in a row, and everyone is like anti-cop, or the cops are bad, or the cops fucked up.
Right.
Now they do have, a lot that are pro-cop, obviously, because it's about catching murderers, and sometimes the cops help. Every so often, maybe every 5 episodes, a cop actually comes up with a good idea. It's usually like the forensic scientist. But I mean, also I have to point out, a lot of the forensics on that show are actually fake.
Yeah.
And they've done episodes. About fake forensics.
Yes.
They got people convicted.
Yeah.
And then they go back and do another episode about the forensics.
Yeah. There was a whole show on Netflix too. I forget what it was called, but it was about how
bad forensics. It's something bad forensics.
And it's
something
about how it's not the best.
Yeah, and you can tell when watching the shows, it'll be like, well, this small town, forensic scientist was baffled by the lack of evidence, so he decided, but there was only one witness to the case, the dog. And he tried, and they come up with all these ways in which they can prove that this dog was in this room as opposed to this
dog
room.
Under oath now.
Yeah, this hair, this sample. Some of it sounds pretty good, but like some of it sounds like bullshit. And even the stuff that sounds pretty good was fucking bullshit, like fire. Like there's like whole TV shows about people who know how to, like arson investigations and all this stuff, and how all these arsons, it started here, there was accelerant here. Like, that's not complete bullshit, but it's not, so they don't know it as well, that they don't, it's like they exaggerate how accurate it is and how detailed they can get with blood spatter, with
I was just gonna say blood splatter.
arson investigations, with with hair samples. Shocking. Like basically the only like all these new forensic sciences that we see on TV like constantly reinforced. Basically, the only one that actually works is DNA, and even then, that's with like some caveats of like you have to handle the stuff correctly, and a lot of times,
and you have to have them in your database, because if they're not in CODIS, you're just sitting there.
It's also like a pretty new science to like be taking people's whole life away over, you know?
Yeah, is new, and well, we gotta get into the OJ trial.
Okay.
I mean, because I think everybody, I would think everybody's kind of regressing to the 90s, and we're all looking for a big, juicy scandal. Obviously, I think the Gabby story is filling that role now. I don't know but it's not an OJ.
I know, and I'm surprised the R. Kelly conviction didn't like muster up more of a reaction. Maybe because it's been such a story for so long.
It's been a story for so long, and ultimately, I mean, why did people not pay attention as much? I don't.
Now it's so weird, right?
It's so weird. Like
2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
There were like a 2-week moment where everybody was watching the documentary in like 2019 talking about it. Yeah, and I feel like it's not ever caught.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, and like it was. I mean, R. Kelly was exposed several times, and nobody really responded like the first couple of times. Like I remember being in fucking like elementary school and hearing about Aaliyah and R. Kelly, maybe middle school at that point. But like as soon as Aaliyah came out, everyone was like, "Hey, did you know he married that like she was underage?" And I'm like, "Wow, that's fucked up." Like we've known that the entire time R. Kelly has had a career basically.
Well, yeah, and there's this whole like weird culture around celebrity too, where people are like, "Oh, well, they're kind of like these demigods, so it's not the same," I think people get that impression in their head too.
Yeah,
but culturally at least, you know, for sure.
All right, so back to OJ though. That was just such a moment for so many people that's so passionate about. Is where people learned what DNA was, not from middle school science, and unfortunately, I guess I don't know what to say. Unfortunately for the prosecutor, it was the first time that most people heard of DNA.
Yeah,
and they say 1 in a million chance that it could be someone other than OJ. I'd be like, there's more than 1 million people on the world. In fact, there's many million people.
Quite a few.
Like that wasn't a good number they were tossing out. It was like too low. It really was too low. I remember because you could do the numbers and be like, you know what? There could be a few guys. I've met guys that look like OJ. Who knows? Yeah. He's got cousins. He's got nephews. Who knows? But man, that trial and how captivated people were, from the chase to the trial to the courtroom. I mention that because people, especially last week, were kind of, giving the thumbs down to true crime and being interested in true crime. And yet, what do people think the O.J. Simpson trial was?
Genesis of true crime, right? Like, like the cultural true crime phenomenon sort of started then, having people captivated watching the Bronco.
What year was that?
94.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I'm pretty sure that was the year I was born, so I don't remember watching The Chase, but I have watched it.
Yeah, but you would have. Everybody watched it. Everybody watched it. It was on nightly news. It was also heavily covered on like entertainment shows, like Entertainment Tonight and Current Affair, and like the equivalent of TMZ. So I guess TMZ still does cover it. And I think maybe like TMZ is like half true crime, probably,
it
right?
does some crime stuff.
No, think about it. Like if you really like broke it down, like the way they approach things and the tabloid approaches things is very true crime based. A lot of our celebrity culture, especially the past couple.
If you've ever been in a movie and committed a crime, you've definitely been reported like by TMZ.
And it was like you were saying on Twitter, you're like, have you ever read a newspaper?
Yes.
Like, what do you think the news? Like this was the news. Like,
yes.
It's called true crime. This is stuff that's actually happening too. It's not like it's like made up and being like drooled and.
I will say, like, since all the Gabby Petito thing and stuff, there has been a lot of like hate directed toward like true crime in particular, for sure. I haven't gotten any like directly, but I've gotten some feedback.
It's very strange because first of all, like half the complaints were from newspapers who would just be covering the story themselves. If they like, I don't know what they're talking about.
Why
Like
are
they have
people talking about
they have a
this?
crime section. It just seemed like they were mad that like TikTokers can go. And this was part of their complaint. Like TikTokers can pull out something instantly.
Sure.
If you're a newspaper, you
Yeah.
gotta check your sources. You gotta do this. You gotta do that. But that's the same complaint they have against like tabloids or whatever. And it's not like the New York Times is like
Yeah.
really that much more reliable.
I think
than
the
anything.
main thing that was bothering people was like the people who profit off of like these horrible things happening to these innocent people.
Right.
But that's still the newspaper.
Yes, it's still the newspaper,
That's
local
still-
news.
and those are like and when you really look at that, that's like horrible people like profiting off of this kind of
Yeah,
shit. You know?
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think with TikTok is more like goofy people. I understand, people objecting to it, but ultimately it's like, even I said this too, as well as like, what is the study of history if
Yeah.
not the study of true crime just on a massive scale?
Just
Right.
massive murders.
Yes.
Like, a lot of murder.
Isn't that what every like study of war is? Is like true crime, like
Yes, quite, and hardcore history. I
Yeah.
think why is that podcast so goddamn popular? Because it's a true crime podcast about history.
Yeah.
That he really approaches it with that intensity where he talks about this regularly. Like, yes, I do go into the details about like the corpses that are piled up and how in World War I in the trenches you would come up to something that looked like a black blanket over everything. And that would actually be flies because there were so many corpses
no.
that there was a
Gosh.
sheet of flies an inch thick over everything.
All I gotta say is if you handle it respectfully, then
Yeah.
it's-
Not that all podcasts do, but
No,
no,
they
no.
absolutely
Yeah.
don't.
I don't
and
think all true crime podcasts are built the same. You know,
Yeah.
No,
It's definitely
and it's hard to strike that balance. Like, we find it difficult.
yeah, it is because I feel like a lot of the shows, like they are the people who run them are pro cop because they're very into. They think that the way to be moral about true crime is to be very hardcore about justice. This is about
Yes.
justice
Yeah.
for the victims. All right? And that's important too. But when you start talking about justice with that hard J, I hear prison cells closing up, and it's not a hops. And like, yeah, you might be doing a show about these sensational cases and serial killers, and they're open and shut, and you know who did them. But that's not the majority of what cops handle or what our carceral system handles. So you have to be responsible when talking about like justice. You can't, talk in these great generalities about the cops or victims or no. You gotta be specific.
wonder how much justice can really be achieved in the American legal and
Yes.
system. So like how much justice can really be brought about for victims within a system that like in itself like is so flawed, so fucked up, gets it wrong so often.
Yeah, all the time. And that's why I like true crime, because it gives me the language to talk about abolition that I think a lot of people who say they're pro-abolition don't have. Because if you don't
Sure.
know what the cops do, how can you say we gotta get rid of cops?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a lot of people will say, yeah, let's abolish the police, and then somebody says, well, what about serial killers? A lot of people don't have an answer to that. I do. I say, what about serial killers? The cops help serial killers. I can cite chapter and verse all the times. The cops have basically been an accessory to the serial killer. I like talking. The Yorkshire Ripper case
Yeah.
is a very interesting one to talk about. And there's I don't know how good the Netflix documentary is. It seemed okay. I watched it. Case File podcast has a really good
Love
summary
that
of it.
podcast,
It's
yeah.
really great. Even though it's Australian, it's still very good.
Oh, I love his voice. Oh my god, I fall asleep to it.
I love his voice, but I have to admit, as a true crime fan, if it happens in the UK, I don't care. Australia is half and half. Half and half. UK is very, very
I like
good.
relate to that. So, oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
I remember my partner and I sat down, we put on a show, and as soon as we realized it was the UK, we were like, no, we
Don't
don't
care.
care. Don't care. Sorry.
But Australia has some crazy.
Australia has some good stuff, but
Yeah.
it's still like the Commonwealth thing kind of bums me out a little bit.
Yeah.
Even Canada too. Even Canada kind of bums me out a little bit. But the York,
So the Commonwealth thing, so no true crime from Virginia either. Or Pennsylvania, any of the
well, they
Commonwealth.
film all the documentaries here. They film
They
forensic
do.
files and shit here. Oh, actually, Taco needs a treat because Shamiltron gave us 1,000 bits.
Okay.
Taco get a couple.
Better wake up, Taco.
Taco, you're sleeping on
You
stream.
hear it. Come here.
Taco, you can't sleep on.
Oh, yeah,
Take
we
a
gotta
tweet.
Right for the
For the
camera.
camera.
What you sleeping on stream for, buddy?
I'm in charge of the treats today.
Yeah. So the Yorkshire Ripper case is a really good one because it was a massive investigation. Investigation that they screwed up, like the cops screwed up constantly. They, were very slow to react, very slow to get the word out to the public, which is what they needed to do. Because serial killers not only you need to get the word out so that people, know that they're in danger, but also the people who know the serial killer will know that they're acting fucked up.
Right.
Like
Right.
that very it always kind of disappoints me when I see it in movies because it's very unsatisfactory as far as storytelling goes. But the reason like a lot of serial killers get caught is because killing people is actually like fucks you up and it's hard, even if you're like a murderer. And so like you're gonna have to take time off of work. You're gonna be in fights with everybody.
Yeah.
Many of
You're gonna
these
be
serial killers
sweaty
are married.
24/7.
Like most of these serial killers are married. Like how
Like-
do you keep that relationship together?
Yeah, and they might not know that you're a serial killer, but they
Yeah.
know something's going on. And so if the cops just get on and say, "Hey, has your husband, partner, co-worker been acting very, very fucking weird lately?" That's the one way to catch him. But the cops in the Yorkshire Ripper case was very slow to do it. They did eventually get like a ton of tips, but what they did, and they got like thousands and thousands of tips, massive manhunt. But the mistake that they made is that one of the lead investigator got it in his head that one of the many people who were confessing to the crime, and many people will send in letters, they will come in and confess to the crime. That's
Yeah.
another thing that you learn from true crime. People falsely confess to
Yes.
being serial killers all
Right.
the
All the time.
Every single major case, you get like 5 or 6 people.
Yeah.
Even the Black Dahlia had several.
Yeah.
It's actually shocking. It almost makes me like, I don't know what it is about cops. Like, why do they like put so many people in jail falsely? But then like when it comes to these big cases, it's like, I know you're lying,
yeah,
buddy.
like, no. Actually, I'm gonna
And
be
they
careful this time.
They suddenly have amazing instincts.
Yeah.
Because that goes into all the like false confessions and then the
Yeah,
false
so many
imprisonments
false
and then the death
confessions.
penalty and it's
So
just
many.
a snowball.
Nobody false confessions. But I digress. But in this case, they got in their head that the lead investigator got in his head that one of these letters that was coming in claiming to be the killer was real and was
Yeah.
coming from the killer, and just because they had gotten the evidence wrong, like because the letter mentioned something that they thought only the killer would know, but in fact that information was available to the public. So, and that same person who sent the letter actually made calls, and he had a heavy accent, and so the investigators eliminated all the suspects who didn't have that accent from that area. Which meant, in part, and the ultimate,
You're, like,
on the,
guessing.
they basically eliminated the actual murderer about 3 times as the suspect. He kept coming up in all these different ways that they were investigating. They would I think one piece of evidence was one of the banknotes that the killer left.
Yeah.
They knew
Yeah.
which job that banknote came from. They know that which payday place sent that banknote to which factory or whatever.
Yeah.
So they knew, but they still ended up eliminating him, even though they interviewed him several times, because this lead investigator got in this battle of wits, and it was like the movies, like the Zodiac.
Yeah.
Which is people think that every serial killer is sending in letters. No.
No.
That's the very weird guys
That's
who
the reason they talk about
I can
this
only-
one.
Yeah.
They talk
Yeah.
about it because it's so
It's like Son
weird.
of Sam, BTK.
Yeah, it's Son of Sam, BTK, and then not the Yorkshire Ripper because that was a
No.
fake. Those were fake
Yeah.
letters.
Yeah.
So those are the and Zodiac I mean, that's like. I'm
Those weren't
probably
even
missing
letters.
some,
Those were
but
just
those
drawings.
something I
Yeah,
could
and
name right now.
And the funny thing is, besides telling the public about the serial killer as the number one tactic, the number two tactic that the FBI gives police is trying to convince the serial killer to write them, to contact them by having one detective come out and act like a TV detective and be like, I'm on the hunt for you, buddy. I'm going to find you. He's a pervert.
Antagonizing.
He antagonized personally. It works. Maybe the way John Douglas tells it, it works 1 out of 10 times. Maybe it's 1 out of 100 ultimately, but it does work occasionally where it worked for BTK. They were able to convince him to send him a floppy.
The floppy disk, from his church.
Yeah, from his church.
Yeah.
So Dennis Rader, horrific serial killer, quite horrific serial killer. Operate for many years. He kind of has broken the methodology of talking about serial killers because he was able to stop for himself for a while, which people didn't think you could do.
Right, you either had to be put in jail or you died. If the serial but also who did that was the Golden State Killer too.
You know what? I actually didn't know that because I am not caught up on my GSK. I am in 3 different GSK documentaries right now.
Oh yeah.
But I haven't gotten to the when they caught him episode yet. I'm still on the. I didn't know he actually took a break. I didn't know if he went to
years.
Please tell me. So after I think the last killings were like in the 80s, maybe.
Yeah, he hadn't killed since pretty much, and then he got caught in what year was it? 2016.
But he took a break in his killings, right?
He did take a break in his killings, but then there was that just long gap up until when he got caught.
Yeah,
he didn't kill.
Yeah, I remember the break because he was a cop. We should say like the Golden State Killer was a cop.
He was a cop.
He was a cop. And he was extremely prolific. We're talking about like. Maybe I think was it close to 100 rapes, 60 to 100 rapes before he started killing people.
He was the East Area rapist first, and then they connected that it was also the Golden State Killer, and another name for him.
And that was a case that the police completely botched.
Original Night
Stalker. So he would move to these different he would do like dozens of crimes in a jurisdiction. The cops would deliberately not tell people because they didn't want to cause a panic. And once it finally got out and people started looking, and he kind of got close to getting caught, he would move to another jurisdiction, start over again, and the cops had not communicated whatsoever.
Yeah, he was all over California, like all over it. So it was like that. It took him so long to even connect the fact that the East Area rapist was the original Night Stalker too.
Yeah, and we should talk a little bit about his MO, because if people had known, he could have been stopped or caught very early on, because first of all, he was a cop, so he knew exactly what to do to make people vulnerable. He would stalk them, he would break into their house early, unload or steal their guns, make sure that sometimes I think he kill the dog sometimes or kidnap him or do something. He would check out the dogs. He would know. He
would just know like everything about.
He would stalk
about the house,
and but he would be walking around in these people's neighborhoods and finding out. And if more people knew, like, hey, there's a strange guy stalking in these neighborhoods. If you see someone looking in windows, walking around, and he almost did get caught doing this a few times. He probably got caught more times. We just didn't know about it, because a lot of times people would say weeks, months later, hey, I saw a strange guy walking around in the neighborhood on such and such day. But since the cops weren't communicating with each other, weren't communicating to the public, none of this information was getting out. And he knew this because he was a cop. And he knew exactly how to get away with it. And the second, he was actually confronted once or twice, he took off and went to another jurisdiction. So he was he could have been, I think he could have been caught much sooner.
They knew he was a cop. They had a feeling he was a cop too, from the beginning.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you dive into the serial killer cases, almost all of them either were cops or tried to be
or
cops.
Military or just something like
that. Or hung out with cops. I know we were talking earlier about Ed
Ed-
Kemper,
Yeah.
who was known that the
cops
loved him.
Ed Kemper.
They absolutely loved him. He would go and hang out at the cop bars. He
Yeah.
couldn't become a cop himself because I think when he was 16 or 17, he murdered his grandparents.
Yeah, he just shot him.
Yeah, he murdered his grandparents when he was a teenager. Eventually got out. Probably was still on his record, I would assume. He should say he passed. He was a model, not inmate, but patient. Was able because he would like read the psychology textbooks and like quote them back to his therapist.
Talking to people.
Yeah, he was just good, incredible at talking to people for some reason.
Like the classic, like charming. Well, not classic charming serial killer, because that actually is very rare. But it's just like, you know, he just had that like. I don't know. He was. Very personable.
like a kind of folksy charm to him, where he was very disarming, even though he's a very big guy, and you could
you would be afraid of him if you looked at him, just because he like towers over.
Yeah,
you.
because he's just a huge guy, but he wasn't like. But when you see him talk, it's like you can see he could just talk your ear off about anything and seem. He's such a strain because he seems like genuinely interested in people, which is not what you expect from like a serial killer to like even like be able to fake it, caring about people. Very, very bizarre guy.
Yeah, I loved his character in Mindhunter.
Oh yeah, the Mindhunter portrayal was very, very good.
It was so good. Surprisingly, like even physically, it was really good.
All right, so let's talk about some more. It's hard to say favorites, you know. What are the most interesting stories? Most interesting.
Yeah, well, for me, it's the Night Stalker, just because of how it got caught. Because I think it's incredible.
See, the Night Stalker one, I always go back and forth on Night Stalker because it's like what do you, how do I put this? It's just like, you know, different kinds of. I guess I don't feel like the same sort of, I don't know, existential dread from like the people who just like do the random killings. It's the people who like are very deliberate that really make me think, what the fuck is humanity, you know?
Well, I think what the fuck is humanity with him, because he didn't have an MO. He didn't have like a type. Like he went for any age, any gender, just anything.
Yeah.
Which is kind of rare for serial killers. Like, you know, Ted Bundy was long brown hair with the middle part, and like usually they have some kind of like, you know, age range or something, and he did not care.
Yeah, I mean, I know Ted Bundy got a lot of heat for not having a diverse selection of not embracing diversity. But let's talk about Ted Bundy, because people did kind of the way that people were talking about the Ted Bundy documentary, I guess maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it's like they were trying to cancel him. They're like,
oh yeah,
it was very strange.
Okay,
and it's weird because they did it for the documentary, but not the movie starring Zac Efron, one of the most handsome guys.
Where they deliberately made him so hot.
Okay.
Yeah, nobody said anything about the movie. It was so weird.
I have hot takes on this because everyone is like, stop saying Ted Bundy was hot. He was not hot, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm not saying he was hot, but yes, he was attractive. He was. And that is what made like the case so, I don't know, different. What other serial killer could you say that about? But like, you know, and that's how he was able to just like do what he did in the way that he did it, by just being like, hey, come walk with me. And the girls would be like, yeah,
this guy,
he was attractive. Yeah,
this guy was a Republican. You know, he's a young Republican. You know, he looked like one of them. Like the movies always make serial killers look very suave, debonair a lot of times. I mean, I love Mia Hannibal, but the fact is, most of them are little grubby little
most of them
weirdos.
Can't talk to people.
Yeah, can't talk to people.
Yeah, but like Ted Bundy could, Ed Kemper could, but Ted Bundy could, and also he was attractive, so all the like, you know, he didn't have to like blitz attack or like sneak into somebody's house. Like he could just be like, can you help me with this? Yeah,
and that the scene from Silence of the Lambs where Buffalo Bill pretends to have a cast straight from Ted Bundy. But Silence of the Lambs clearly looms large in the middle of, you know, serial killer culture. And I really like the film, enjoy the film, but I was really surprised that if you actually, because that killer is based on, but Hannibal Lecter is based on 3 killers. Mexican, I think, doctor who I think killed a couple people, and he ended up in prison, and he had 6 fingers on one hand. And that's why in the book Hannibal Lecter has 6 fingers on one hand. And there's also Ed Gein.
Yeah.
And when I was reading about the Ed Gein story, I was actually shocked to learn that the Buffalo Bill like tones it down significantly from what like the actual grotesquerie of what happened. Buffalo Bill is like 1 out of 10 on what Ed Gein actually did. I was shocked to learn this recently.
Yeah. Ed Gein was gross. I don't even know what other word to say.
Like, if you want to like lose your lunch, you can dive into the Ed Gein stuff. But the reason I bring it up is because Ed Gein was like, 30 maybe, or maybe when he was born. Let me look that up. Ed Gein, he was born in 1906.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he was committed in 1954, 1957, and he's probably he still might be one of the more gruesome killers, at least as far as the actual acts committed. I think we have this idea that we just got perpetually worse, but no, and when you dive into I guess the prehistory of true crime is what the West, the Wild West, and the serial and the frontier and the shit that happened in Louisiana. I heard today about this black woman serial killer. Yes, Queen, in Louisiana, who was killed. She claimed she was part of a cult, and she killed they killed 20 people in Louisiana.
How?
An axe.
Oh.
With an axe. And claimed it was part of a cult. Now, with a lot of these cases...
Not the Axeman of Louisiana.
Yeah, not the axe. Although I did learn about that case recently, which is...
or was it a cult of awesome women?
Yeah. But... Yeah, because the Axeman is an unsolved one, I believe. Man, there's so many unsolved serial killer cases. So many. I mean, talk to your granddad. Go through your granddad's boxes.
Well, what's a big one for my parents is I'm from Long Island, so it's the Long Island serial killer.
Oh yeah. Wait, I thought they caught.
No.
Oh yeah, I was watching a documentary. Yeah.
They
Still haven't caught.
And my dad, I don't even know. Well, I'm going to say it. I think I said it on my podcast. My dad is it was the chief of police at the time. I'm certain of it. Because apparently he was really sketchy. And then he actually ended up going to jail and the killing stopped.
That's wild.
So, cop again.
That's
potentially,
wild.
allegedly.
I mean, because the Long Island serial killer, I don't want to mess up the details, but it is a lot of bodies in a very small place. And we don't, and nobody actually knows anything.
Yeah, it
which
was
is
all sex workers.
Yeah,
too,
all
and
sex
they
workers.
Were all just their bodies were just found on Gilgo Beach.
Yeah, and it was sex workers and it wasn't just they weren't just street sex workers.
No, some were Craigslist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We. Craigslist, email. I'm pretty sure that if somebody wanted to find out about
email address,
the guitar I sold in Tokyo, if that was stolen or something, you could probably find that out. Yep. Through 2-3 years ago, you're telling me you can't. Yeah.
Right.
Cops do what about serial killers? What do cops do about serial killers other than shrug? I don't know.
But they're oh, this is complicated.
Yeah.
This is a lot. This is a lot of people.
Yeah. So one serial killer that was close to home, even though I didn't really feel it that much when it was happening. I don't know why. It was just, I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It just didn't feel as real to us, even though I knew people who were in the demographic of the victims. It was people would joke about it. So, and I'm talking about the Baton Rouge serial killer. And this was another big case that the FBI screwed up a bit. Derek Todd Lee, because I mean, well, I want to get it right, because generally speaking, the assumption is that a serial killer probably a white male, especially if the victims are also white. That is a pretty rock solid assumption as far as you can go with those types of assumptions. But problem is, when this is the exception, people are just being murdered and nothing is happening. So it's a kind of a high stakes game of assumptions to play. And the assumption, the FBI says that they never said this, but the perception is that they said this, that they had said that the serial killer would be a white male.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember hearing this on the news. Now, the FBI says we didn't actually say that, and they might be telling the truth, but that was the perception, and our local yokels acted on that, and the serial killer Derek Todd Lee turned out to be a black guy and a smooth talking black guy. That's why he was able to get into these very suburban, not suburban, but like some of it was suburban, but some of it was like college apartments, like that young co-eds lived in, young women with like a little bit of money, like they like it's not where the broke girls live, it's where the girls with a little bit of money would live. And he was just this dark skinned black guy who was somehow able to talk his way into all of these places and commit all these murders. I think he did murder. We know he killed at least one black woman, but he wasn't just targeting vulnerable sex workers. He was targeting middle class young women, and I think a few older women like in their homes in these safe neighborhoods. And the police were really like baffled because they were talking about it on the news, but they were telling people, oh, look for this, look for a white guy driving this kind of truck, but it turned out to be a black guy driving this. And they tried to use all the basic assumptions that you would make about a serial killer.
Which is, white male.
Yeah, white, even if, especially if it's happening in the suburbs. Like, of course it's a white male. This is Louisiana.
Look for...
no black guy is going to be walking around these neighborhoods. Somebody would have told us about it. But a lot of the neighborhoods were like college neighborhoods, or neighborhoods where you see a lot of workers in. So they would just assume that, oh, he's the cable guy, oh, he's the lawn guy, oh, he's the maintenance man. And that's how he was able to move around. And he was apparently a very smooth talker. I've never heard him talk because he actually didn't talk after. He never confessed, never, just didn't give any interviews. So we really don't know. But
what years was this happening?
This was happening 1992 to 2003. So when in 2003, I was in college with, people who were like could have been targeted by it. But nobody, I just don't remember a lot of people. Like, people were scared, but it was just like, you didn't still no one, I don't think anybody of that demographic is going to think it's going to happen to them. I think I think it's very hard to, like, you're in college, you're young, you're going out with your friends, like, you just don't think a serial killer is going to knock on your door.
I mean, well, also now, and this makes me like, I'm going to ask you a question, which is like, do you think that like there are, because like 70s, 80s, serial killer central, those time periods. And now it feels like we don't hear about them that much. And are they out there? We're just not hearing about it, or have they just like diminished?
So there was a big explosion, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Like 90% of the serial killers we think about happening. So it was a huge explosion. And I think that might have been specific to the time period. The book I'm reading, I've read a couple of theories. One is just crime was up during that time period, and a lot of people think it was due to the lead poisoning in the water. And there's strong correlation between it. It's not that is not that kooky idea.
Wow.
There's also the book I'm reading. The suggestion is that a lot of the serial killers, the pathology comes from our post-war period, post-World War II, post-Vietnam, whether it's actual soldiers who are coming back or the children of these people who are dealing with, undiagnosed PTSD and being raised by these fathers and these mothers who went through these horrible things or had their lives completely changed, their gender roles completely flipped, and for whatever reason that produced these antisocial behaviors and in a very, very, very few amount of people leads to serial killing, and you just multiply that times a few million, and that's why you have the boom. And maybe you don't have that one now because we don't have the lead, we have the wars, but the wars are different.
I saw some interesting theorizing theorizing in the chat that they've been kind of replaced by mass shootings,
Yes.
which I think is,
Yeah.
that's serial killing in a short, condensed period of time,
Yeah, and I
That
don't.
is
Sort of
True,
same
chat.
profiles that have tended to kind of rise. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I think it depends. I think part of it. This is my kooky theory.
Ooh.
I think that a large part of it is the internet, because
Ah.
if
Technology, that's what I was thinking.
if you are a disturbed loner who hates women, you can just go on Reddit, one of the most popular sites, and find thousands of people who agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
If when the 1990s you were just by yourself and you were stewing by yourself with no one else to talk to about how much you hate women, now you
get
can
a specific community about the specific way that you hate women.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
will, that's how niche and specific and the internet, the dawn of the internet has allowed people to get.
So my theory now, even though most of these incels and creeps probably wouldn't end up being serial killers, I think the simple fact that some of these that the type of people who would be serial killers have communities that they can join, and they can torture and harass people without actually going and harass women in a big group and ruin their lives without actually risking going to jail because they're fucking cowards. I think maybe
Look at Twitter.
Yeah, our Twitter account. I like
The shit I see in people's replies is so deranged, dude.
Yeah, so if you have that outlet, maybe you never get to the point where you feel so isolated, alone, agitated that you think, okay, I'm just gonna start killing
Just
people.
gonna go out there
and start killing people. As a kooky theory, there's no way to prove it. I think humanity will
No.
end before we figure this out.
Oh yeah.
But that's my theory for now, that I think the internet, because it gives the antisocial behavior all these outlets where it's praised even.
Right.
Like, you don't have to go out and be a serial killer. You can immediately just be an antisocial creep and get really popular online, and people praise you for it.
Yeah.
So awkward and quirky. Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And like also the advancement of technology. I don't know if that's scaring people off, but I mean,
well, it does make it a lot easier. Well, it does make it a lot easier for the DNA testing helps. The forensics, the such that they're real, I think helps, because it helps catch people after they've killed one or two people instead of having the typical, which was like I think in the book I read, it was like 8 at some point was like the average before they would catch somebody. Like, just like astonishing
8.
number. I think now it's down to like 2 or 3 or something like that.
Right.
But like, it used to be like really, really high numbers. Absolutely insane amounts. And there's I read all these stories, and like just all these lives that get like snuffed out and erased, and I don't know, it makes me, how do I put this, like, just when I hear about all these killers and these murderers, and then how casually they can take a life, and then I think about like how every single one of our politicians does this just on a day-to-day basis. Just like the average vote in Congress, they kill like 100 times more people. Like, even the Congress people we like are just just racking up bodies like nothing.
Yeah, they'll like
Flies
fucking
everywhere.
cry about it or whatever, but they still got body trails.
Yeah, so like we're talking about like how horrific these serial killers were and how destructive these people are, but when you look at like we were talking about history, like Obama is like has killed more people than any serial killer. Like, just he has a Netflix deal.
yeah.
Like, I mean, probably, and he has a better one than Ted Bundy. If I'm being honest with you.
I don't think Ted Bundy's making shit from those. At least I hope not.
But his birthday party in Martha's Vineyard,
Or his family.
Yeah.
Ted Bundy's dead.
Oh, so fiction movies. Which
Oh.
ones do you think are the best
Oh,
when it comes to
gosh.
serial killers?
Okay,
Best serial
fictional
killers.
serial killer films.
Like,
I mean, I think Zodiac is like it's not a fictional, but that movie is kind of one of the creme de la creme serial killer movies, I think.
See, it's always left me kind of cold for some reason. Zodiac always leaves me cold. I like Fincher. I like true crime, but for some reason that movie just has never done it for me. Even though I love the scenes of
It's a
Zodiac.
slow burn to nothing in some ways. You
Yes.
know? Like you are waiting the whole time for something if you don't know the case. And
Yeah.
then you really kind of get absolutely.
and then you
nothing
find out
by
it's
the
real, and you're like, oh wow, they really haven't caught him.
end.
Yeah.
Oh shit! Am I safe?
Yeah. I Zodiac's one of my favorite. My all-time favorite is Scream.
Oh, it's spooky, scary.
Yeah,
Scream.
Scream is my all-time.
I was just watching it downstairs with my
Really?
family. Yes.
Oh hell yeah.
yeah, we
Yeah.
were just watching.
It's just set the basis for every teen slasher after that.
Yeah.
And it just had such a big impact on those movies
I
in
re-
general.
Yeah, I really like Scream. And Scream, now that I think about it, it is one of the slashers that actually uses, if not the term, but the feeling of like serial killer too as well.
Yeah.
Like he's a slasher is kind of like a random spree killer,
Yeah.
like who only does it on one night, but
On
also
Halloween night.
yeah, but also Scream is like it's multiple nights, and he has like a purpose and a MO of sorts, and so they're more like serial killers
Yeah.
in the Scream. I'm starting to realize that is something I kind of like about it, because even though it's it has these parodic satirical elements to it, it feels kind of more real because it's like he's like a real person who kills people in real life. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that. I do like that they make fun of scary movies in that movie.
Yeah.
And throughout, and they just joke about the classic tropes and all this, and then it's great. It's also one of the first, I think, to really do that too, as far as horror goes.
Well, certainly one of the best. I think I just watched a scary movie for
Yeah.
this MCU Street Fight podcast. I actually liked it a lot, and that movie had a bigger budget than the original Scream, and some of the scenes have better special effects, are bigger special effects in Scary Movie than they did in Scream. It was actually quite interesting to see that the parody kind of outdoes the original at some point.
I love Scary Movie 3. That one is good when they do the ring and signs.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Oh,
one.
that one's a good one. You got to see that one. What's your fictional one?
My favorite. I love me Hannibal. I love the
Okay,
TV,
yeah.
mostly the TV show.
I have to
But-
watch that. I've heard it's
Oh,
fantastic.
it's amazing.
People love it.
It's absolutely. We can watch it if you're up for it. We can watch it after we finish the stream. But yeah, we can watch an episode of Hannibal. That's a very good spooky pick.
Yeah.
And actually the first episode is very procedural too. The first season really is like FBI, trying to do FBI profiling in kind of a serious way. But I think my favorite serial killer movie, gotta go with Manhunter. Manhunter still staying.
I haven't seen that.
Manhunter is so good. So good. It's
I know.
absolutely
I haven't
beautiful.
seen that
Who's in
either.
that?
Oh, Michael Mann. It's
okay.
it was the first adaptation of the Hannibal Lecter series. It's of the Red Dragon. What's the book called? I think the book was called Red Dragon, and the Edward Norton Jr. movie was called Red Dragon. But the first one, Manhunter, it has Brian Cox as Hannibal Lecter. It was very good, but a more rugged, nasty. He's a prisoner. You can tell he's a fucking convict, and he's not he's had all his dignity stripped away, and he's really really good and creepy and direct in it. Has the guy from CSI as the detective, but he's a lot better in it than he is in CSI. he's so good. He's 20 years younger and super hot and handsome. It's really really good, and the visuals are so good. The music is sick. I really love Manhunter, and the serial killer is this guy. He's called the Tooth Fairy in the newspapers, and he hates it because he hates it, and he actually attacks one of the journalists. Who, like, the FBI sets up the journalist. They say, "All right, we need you to antagonize the serial killer so that he gets mad at you and comes at you, and we're going to do a sting operation," which I thought was not necessarily realistic to what the cops do, but kind of the idea of what they do. And like many police informants, they end up out to dry, and like the serial killer comes after him. It's a brilliant scene, a very, very good movie.
That's an interesting tactic, like just naming the serial killer something like so totally lame, because a lot of them just try to name themselves anyway.
Yeah. And one thing I do want to appreciate about the Hannibal Lecter series, and the writer of it, Thomas Harris, he picks up a lot from, I think he certainly done his research on true crime, on FBI profiling. I don't think he ever gave like that John Douglas guy any credit, even though he ripped off the character from him, which I think is kind of cool, actually. I think it's cool to rip off an FBI agent.
Yeah. Like a really prolific FBI agent.
Just ripped him the fuck off. But when you read the books, like, they're absolutely positively not pro cop or pro FBI. The FBI are mostly like buffoons. Hannibal Lecter is like much smarter than them, which is not like a real thing. Like, serial killers in general aren't like geniuses. A lot of them, some of them have above average intelligence, but they can't use it because they don't have the social skills or the patience to like succeed in school or at work. They just like are too arrogant and self-centered. Even like the smart ones especially are super arrogant and self-centered, don't think they have to follow the rules, so they never get anywhere. But and Hannibal Lecter is obviously the super genius, very cultured, etc., etc. And in the books especially, he plays the FBI. Clarice and him are not equals. He's like toying with her the entire time, and he brainwashes her and turns her into a serial killer. And that happened in the book that he wrote after the movie comes out, where Jodie Foster puts on that very feminist portrayal where Clarice is so strong and determined and overcomes her fears. In the book, is not that. It's like she's just kind of like, this goofy, very young FBI agent who's being manipulated by her boss, Jack Crawford, who reminds her of her father, and also she wants to fuck him, and like he's playing to that. And then she's manipulated by Hannibal Lecter, who reminds her of her father, and she also wants to fuck him, and he plays into that. And she's just the entire time she's manipulated. She does catch the guy at the end, but Hannibal Lecter gets away.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to read that book and think, wow, they caught this one guy, but they let this much, much, much more dangerous guy get out while killing a bunch of cops. Wow, aren't the FBI fucked up? Well, the movie comes out and everybody's like, oh my God, Clarice Starling is the fucking baddest bitch that ever lived. Jodie Foster is so cool in her. We need more heroes like this. And then so Thomas Harris, now I'm going on conjecture now, but I think Thomas Harris saw that and was like, these motherfuckers didn't get it. So the first scene in Hannibal, the sequel to Silence of the Lambs, the novel, is Clarice Starling as a detective shooting a pregnant black woman in like this awful like drug land shootout. Like this is big, like early 90s style like gun battle. You know when like the Dirty Harry, Predator 2, all that shit where like gangs had taken over city because of drugs, and they were like, it was like a war zone in the city, and that's basically what happened. Like the first scene in that, and she shoots a woman while I forget whether she's pregnant or she's holding her child. I think maybe she's actually holding her baby, and she shoots her. And and she gets in trouble for it because everybody's like, wow, you shot like a fucking pregnant woman, you're not a hero cop. And like she's disgraced, she's almost kicked out of the FBI, and then she ends up like coming in contact with Hannibal Lecter, who's out, and then he like brainwashes her into eating her partner. And that was his commentary on what the FBI means as far as, the world of Hannibal Lecter and serial killing. And I really appreciate that. It's like, it's a very big, like, fuck you.
Yeah, that is a huge fuck you.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's based off of, like, a character John Douglas
the
created
real guy.
because John Douglas, like, you know, in the book in like Mindhunter, he's like, of course, he's like very pro FBI. He was
He's
in the
the
FBI, but he's like, you know, he even bashes like armchair detectives and he says that they ruin cases.
Yeah, he does
most of the time.
Yes.
And he's very like, you know, we know what we're doing, and
You know, he's kind of changed his tune over years since he's left the FBI. He's actually, I think maybe it was the John Bonet case. He consulted on that, and the FBI got super mad at him for speaking on that because he was like, "There's no way like the parents do." The parents hired him. But he says and I actually take him at his word because
I agree with it too.
I take him at his word. He says that, you know, I am an objective observer. Which sometimes the defense brings me, sometimes the prosecution brings me.
Yeah.
I have fought with the FBI before. He's probably the one guy, if there is one good cop, maybe it's him because he was never a cop. That's one of the things he mentions in every book is that I was actually to scam my way into getting the FBI without having to work fucking the streets or do Vice or anything like that. I was straight up going in and creating a methodology for hunting, for not even hunting, for understanding these crimes and interviewing these people and asking them why they did it. And the cops had just never done it before. And so I actually do appreciate his perspective. And now that he's no longer in the FBI, he's written books that have been quite critical at times of the police, and not nearly as much as you would hope. But you can get a lot.
Well, that still like speaks volumes considering he was
FBI agent. So he's like, and like with all this stuff, it's like about reading it with your brain on. You know, you can't take everything at their word. So he had like every book he talks about how we need to do the death penalty. You just skip that fucking chapter.
I know. See, because he was like, if you had seen what I've seen out there, then you would be pro death penalty. And I'm like, no, cops, no, interrogation tactics, false confessions, no, thank you.
What do you think happened with John Bonet?
John Bonet, I actually, I forget how John Douglas did it. I think the book is called maybe The Cases That Haunt Us. It's about famous unsolved cases, Jack the Ripper, Zodiac. And he basically lays out like it probably wasn't the parents, just because if you tried to tell the story of what would have happened if the parents did it, it would be something bizarre like in a fit of rage, her mother beats her to death and then fakes that she was sexually assaulted and then asks the husband to come help, or vice versa. The husband assaults her and then the mother helps him cover up. Like if you just like try to say out like how it could have been the parents, it just doesn't. It's just not how people behave.
I in my head, if you're one of those people who are like, it was her brother did it, I'm like, you have not looked that much into this story, or you don't know that much about.
I know, and the bit that we looked into it, I really think that it was random because
or someone
or someone who knew them, but there were also like an absurd amount of break-ins in the neighborhood around them around that period of time as well.
Yeah, John Douglas' theory that someone that they knew, like a neighbor, and which is not and the reason John Douglas says this, and is important to say, he's not like psychic. He's not a psychic detective. This is Hollywood shit. It actually pisses him off, actually. He complains about this. So what mind hunting in the movies is that you are a grizzled fucking detective and you're getting to the mind of a serial killer and it's haunting you, and you're like damn near have a psychic connection to him. Sometimes a literal psychic connection in a lot of movies. In reality, it's just like you get in a folder and you like checking it against old cases and like what did the vast majority of these serial killers say? Well, they say when they do this type of murder, they usually watch their victim beforehand. And so we gonna go to the house and then we're gonna look and see where could you watch beforehand. And the movie Manhunter actually has that example in it, but it's not based on like this genius that these cops have. It's just from studying. It's just from anything else. And so his idea was that, you know, from what this case looks like, it looks like somebody who was a neighbor, someone in their life who was personally obsessed with John Bonet and attacked her, and that was his theory, because similar cases had happened like that.
And they were having like a Christmas party and she was in all those pageants and like pretty sure I think the window was open, if I remember correctly. I could be totally wrong. We did talk about it on my show, but that was
like a year ago.
Yeah.
That was about a year ago.
Jack the Ripper.
Unsolved.
Impossible to know. We're gonna be talking about From Hell on our Struggle Session Presents the Alan Moore Show pretty soon. Alan Moore goes with the royal family theory, which, sad to say, is completely ridiculous.
Yeah, what?
But it I think is mostly for the book. He knows he was cheating because like the ages don't even match up for what his proposal. Like the guy who he proposes was doing the killings for the royal family would have been like too old and infirm to actually do it. We're never gonna. I don't think we're ever going to find out.
No, we're never.
And there was not even really a lot of promising ones from what suspects. A lot of suspects, but none that you could really say, all right, 60, 70%, this is the guy. Just because it just happened too early.
Yeah, it happened a long time ago.
In investigations, and people just didn't know what to look for, didn't know what questions, that certainly the cops didn't know what the fuck.
And like, what are you gonna do now?
Yeah.
Like, what? John Bonet's another one. I think we're never gonna know the answer to.
Yeah. What was it? I was just thinking of another good one that was very that they had some good suspects. Black Dahlia.
Yeah.
Black Dahlia. Now there's a couple. There were a lot of suspects. There was a shocking amount of good suspects for the Black Dahlia.
Yeah.
People who were arrested and like charged for it. Like I think that's been glossed over in like that. It must have been like OJ times 10 at the time, because they were like arresting a new guy like every other day.
Every doctor, they were like, surgery. Yeah, that one.
Yes, and there's a theory that the Black Dahlia was actually part of a serial murder, because there were a lot of women murdered in LA around that time with similar demographics. But the thing with any of these true crime stories, you can tell any of these stories and create a serial killer if you want. You could say like all these women had X, Y, and Z in common, but they don't have ABC, which are pretty important. But you can tell the story to trick people into kind of thinking that it's all connected. So when it comes to Black Dahlia, there was one guy I remember who was supposed to give an interview he was supposed to talk to the police the next day. And he had been in the area. He was a kind of a rough and tumble guy, former soldier. Most of the suspects were soldiers, most because she hung out with soldiers, and, soldiers kill women a lot. And he fell asleep with a lit cigarette in his mouth the day before he's supposed to be talking to police about it, and dies. And never completes the interview. So, and this is in the John Douglas book, The Cases That Haunt Us, and he goes through all the different suspects. This one sounded kind of good. Like when he detailed like his biography, he knew Elizabeth Shore. He knew. He kind of had.
Well, I like the doctor. I know there was a doctor that was like a prime suspect, and I liked that because of how her body was just like precisely like cut. Like it looked like this person knew what they were doing and like had experience in that.
I mean, we're talking about true crime. Those pictures have been around since like it happened, like the 1940s, and we act like kind of shocked. We're actually, I think in some ways, like we're more like tame, because I shared this picture recently, but during World War II, it was a common thing for soldiers and American soldiers to send body parts of Japanese soldiers back to their sweethearts and their girlfriends. And Time magazine actually has a photo. It's their picture of the week or picture of the month, maybe, of a skull of a Japanese soldier and a white American woman sitting next to it, smiling. And this, shit. I mean, that's a guy that was like just murdered. That's not like so. That's someone you killed, and they sent the skull over, and Time magazine posted like
that's like someone's grandpa.
Well,
like
it was somebody's dad at that time. At that time, it was somebody's dad.
Right now,
I just did an episode. My latest episode was about Elizabeth Bowtry, and she was a serial killer in like the 1500s, and her husband went to the Long War, like against the Ottomans, and was playing like football with the heads.
Oh,
and like kickball with the severed heads.
I mean, we can't. We could get into execution, the public executions.
Yeah.
Huge entertainment. That's what we would.
Entertainment.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what it was. It
It's
was
like-
entertainment. You would go to see somebody
With
get
like your
executed.
kids. Like,
Yeah, with the
come on,
kids,
kids.
you
Yeah.
bring the whole family.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they were
it's
speaking
really
to. This woman was a member of the royals, right, and was witnessing this from a very young age. Like,
Yeah.
was shown torture and stuff, and it came to a point where she was going to villages to recruit people to come live in her castle and be tortured by her.
Yeah, this was Elizabeth Boucher. Yeah, she was.
Yep.
she's-
Yeah, I think I've heard of her. I
she's
think I've
known
heard
as, like,
her
the
a while.
original Dracula and the
Oh yeah.
one of the most vicious female serial killers, and yeah, she was brutal. But she would watch these like public executions and stuff at a young age, and then it like, I don't know,
It became some
messed-
kind of like fixation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we need. Maybe the age of the white male serial killer needs to be over, and we need to bring back the Slay Queen.
It's time for the girl boss murderer.
I
yeah.
would love the girl boss. That's what he was calling her.
Yeah, it was well, and also like we do a pretty good amount of like, in addition to true crime stuff, we do a lot of like just general spooky stuff.
Yeah.
And we did one about a witch pretty recently that was killing a lot of people. That was a big Slay Queen murderer.
The Bell
Witch.
Yeah, that one. She was a queen.
So like, I feel like there were more female serial killers before, and they racked up like 40, 50 bodies. They would just
yeah.
like put out an ad and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a workman," and they would just kill any dude who showed up.
They would get so many bodies under their belts before they got caught. Like women especially.
Like what?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. I guess back in the day, it's like as soon as you like left like town like that, but you basically like no longer existed to anybody,
Yeah, of
you
course.
know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like if your brother, my brother's going off to Baltimore, that means you're never going to see your brother again. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the end of the relationship. But man, like it just seemed like it makes me think like, who would be a serial killer now if not for the fact that everybody has a cell phone?
Yeah.
Like which
That's what-
woman you know would absolutely be catching bodies on Craigslist if you couldn't track. If there's no way to track it.
Catching bodies on Craigslist. Yeah, that's a very good question.
It's so strange because it's like, all right, so these women didn't go to war. These women, well, maybe some of them were lead poisoned, but you know, I don't know, because we haven't talked about what makes a serial killer.
Yeah.
When you get into true crimes, a lot of things. The number one thing you find out: head injuries.
Head injuries.
Actual head and just getting bopped in the head when you're a kid, maybe one or two times, damages some part of your brain, some kind of brain injury, and you lose something that stops you from.
Yeah, it's
killing.
weird. I don't know. You could probably see how many serial killers there are that have had
Like-
injuries. It is baffling.
Baffling.
Yeah, it is insane. And then also, you know, like childhood abuse.
Childhood abuse is
Yeah.
a big one. Big one.
Yeah. But then you have people like Ted Bundy who didn't experience any of that. And,
Yeah.
You know, so it's, I don't know. And then they have like the McDonald triad, which is the early signs of a serial killer,
Yes.
which is like the bedwetting, I think harming animals,
Harmon.
and then like fascination with fire.
Fire.
I want to say, yeah.
Which is 3, but a lot of
Well,
serial
two
killers.
of those, like a lot of little kids piss
Yeah.
in bed and love fire.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's the problem with any of this stuff, because 99% of the people this applies to aren't, you know, serial killers, and that's
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
kind and that is
I mean,
what,
the violence against animals, that's like always a huge warning sign
And-
that there's some kind of something going on.
yeah,
you
but
know?
then there's also like a lot of serial killers don't do violence against
Yeah,
animals,
sure,
and in
yeah.
fact are offended at the idea.
Yeah.
right.
There's a
right.
lot of serial killers who will insist, like, no, I never hurt animals, and they will get pissed off.
I
if they
love
get
the
asked
idea of
about
them
it.
getting offended. Like
Yes.
that's actually too far for you to say that I would hurt an animal. What the
Like,
fuck?
I'm offended. I know, yeah, but
You're
so
actually hurting me by saying
aside from those things that we mentioned, like childhood abuse and head injuries, I don't I don't know.
Yeah, it's so because it only happens to even the people who, I mean, obviously people, millions of people that suffer child abuse
Yeah, of
Right.
course,
don't
of
don't
course.
become
And had
don't hurt anybody,
injuries.
head injuries don't hurt anybody, but they're just
But is it something? Is it like there's something in genetics that gets activated by?
Yeah,
like,
it's
like
it's
so strange.
It's
right?
so
Like,
strange. There's no way to really
Nature-
right,
isolate.
you can't tell at all.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
nature
These are-
versus nurture
Or
argument.
a mix of
Or
all
yeah,
three.
combo, yeah.
But I guess the important thing is like always was still pretty rare, and it's now still pretty rare. So if you're ever thinking about making some wide-ranging carceral policy, you probably don't need to like worry about serial killers
No.
when doing it, because it is a very rare thing. It's not something you can protect. And I guess we should mention, yes, there have been communist serial killers. Sorry to say, the USSR did kind of try to cover it up when it happened sometimes because they were saying, "Oh, we're a communist utopia. We don't have those kind of problems. That's a capitalist." And I actually think that is partially true. I think there is maybe some partial truth to that, but it's not the whole truth. They hadn't quite gotten to the point where they had gotten rid of serial killers as far as progress goes.
No, you didn't get that
Maybe
far.
capitalism does call serial killers, but you hadn't gotten rid of all the capitalism yet. So and the Russian serial killers were able to rack up a lot of bodies because it's such a big place and wide open rural. It's like,
yeah, right.
like you can just go in. It's
You
just
can
so
just keep
huge.
walking.
Just keep walking. You can walk
Yeah.
from one end to the country to the other, just kill everybody, and nobody's gonna catch you because it's just so fucking big.
It's so
By
big.
the time they get to the next body, you're already,
Yeah.
halfway across the country.
Israel Keys. You know about Israel Keys?
Israel Keys. I've heard that name recently.
He is a recent, like 2011, I want to say, and he would make kill kits around the country and just bury them in random places and
yeah.
go to different states and dig them up and kill someone there and then go to a different state and dig up a kill kit.
Yeah, that motherfucker.
Yeah.
That dude was like like a real life like Criminal Minds type serial
Yes.
killer. That's like what the serial killers on Criminal Minds do. Like they're
Yep.
so fucking advanced.
That
like
was like unheard of what he was doing. Like that was insane. Just so well thought out. I mean, but
yeah, and clearly,
awful.
it is. We do say like a lot of serial killers do get ideas from movies, and
he
yeah.
Mindhunter. He liked John Douglas.
Yeah, they read those books, they study them, but now this is mostly coming from the FBI, so they are probably covering their ass, but they generally, and because he writes a lot of books about serial killers, but he basically says like, and I think this is true, you don't become a serial killer because you see something violent in a movie, but it does help. It helps them with their fantasies. It gives them ideas for how to enact their fantasies.
Yeah, it certainly helps. Like, it will certainly help if you have that thought somewhere in your mind. It would be illuminated, though, in some way, or give some kind of at least inkling of this or vision of it.
It's more. It's more like actually they already have the vision. Because being a serial killer, the majority of what you do actually is not like killing people or stalking people, it's fantasizing.
Right.
Yeah.
And what they will do is they will look through, porno mags and, the more violent porno mags if they can find them, and try to find the fantasy, the picture that lines up with the fantasy that they already have, or something that gives them an idea that they glom onto. But they're not like sponges. Like they're very specific in what they want, even if they don't know what they want. So it's never like a movie's never going to make somebody a serial
It's not
killer.
going to activate it.
Yeah,
it
it's
serves as an avatar for kind of desire.
Yes, it's an
Yeah.
avatar for desire. Like even saying, like John Douglas always says, it gives them ideas, but it doesn't give them ideas to kill people. It gives them like, oh, I'm gonna tie this person up this way instead of that way. And it get kind of dark, but that's the kind of thing that they get into. So you can't blame movies. That we were talking about what creates serial killers. It's not movies, not video games, not porno
Not
magazines,
pop
not comic,
culture,
not comic books. People try to blame comic books back in the day. It's none of those things. But it is worth talking about. Like there was a lot more common, I think, violent sexual media easily accessible we think of the porn on the internet being the main thing, but the detective magazines, which were very popular with a lot of serial killers, mixed a lot of sex and violence, and a lot of the psychologists who will still say, movies don't cause video games, this stuff doesn't cause violence. But what you should be careful of is mixing the sex with the violence. If you're going to have a naked woman and have a woman tied up, have a couple pages in between, tied up against her will, I should say. Have a couple pages in between. Have a few minutes in between in the movie. That's their one pitch. That's the kind of the few things that they actually want the media to do. Besides, also when it comes to mass shooters, they actually don't think there should be less press coverage because it influences the next mass shooter, because most of them want to be famous.
Yeah.
So if you use their name a bunch, make them talk about their manifesto, that inspires the next one. It doesn't inspire. It inspires the next shooter. But it's very different than what they say about serial killers, which is you should talk about the serial killer usually often. So when it comes to the FBI, these former FBI agents, they at least are trying to solve a problem and think about it, which I don't think our police forces our average police force is doing. Like, they're like creating problems and like they're spending money and that's kind of
murdering people
That's all they do. Now the FBI murders a bunch of people too, and creates their own problems. But when it comes to this specific, because most of these guys are nerds, they don't even work in the field. Like, they just like John Douglas just teaches. He just when he was in the FBI, he just taught and sat. So he wasn't even really a cop, but it was like an attempt to turn, what we think of the fantasy of a cop, of a guy hunting the worst criminals and using his smarts and these specific methods and science to do it. They tried to do it. So I do appreciate that. But still, all cops are bastards.
But still, like, yeah. Yeah. Do you have any other? I wanted to talk about back to the movies real quick because last year we watched Friday the 13th for the first time.
Oh yeah.
And it was so good.
Yes.
I loved it. I love like summer camp murder. I think it's really fun.
It is the best. Just watching teens get murdered at summer camp.
Summer camp. It's great.
It's perfect.
It's my favorite genre.
And I think you can still do it because, hey, cell phones don't work at most of those places. Nope. It would still work.
No. The woods is always a good conceit.
Yes.
So
even though you, generally speaking, probably not going to get murdered in the woods by a serial killer, even though there are some that have hunted in the woods, I think, but I think mostly you're gonna get dumped in the woods. You're not.
You're gonna be found
when
there.
The job's done.
Yes.
Yeah. Were you gonna say something, Harrison?
Well, I was just gonna say, now that we're in spooky season, what are like favorite horror movies? Like, what are you getting gearing up to watch?
Oh, well, here I'm actually ashamed. Because I was supposed to already put out an episode for our pick of 31 Days of Horror, but we can talk about. I'm still working on the list. Maybe y'all can help me out of it. And
And we'd be happy to.
I'm still putting it together. Episode will probably come tomorrow. Yeah, y'all be fine. Watch some horror. Y'all know where to find horror movies, folks. So let me see. As far as the movies go, I have some games up there, but a new movie I added on, House That Jack Built. Givon is very, very violent. Very, very violent.
Okay.
Serial killer horror movie, very real. It's kind of like Hannibal, but like taking that shit seriously. Let's see, Candyman I had up there. Very, very good.
I want to see that.
Oh, and this is the old one. The new one, the OG one, it's amazing, and it's all about gentrification. It's so good.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's so good. Great politics, great everything. Let's see, Hellraiser 2 I have on there. Slumber Party Massacre.
Now that sounds like some summer camp kind of fun vibes.
Well, here's the thing about Slumber Party Massacre, right? It was written originally by a feminist scholar as a parody takedown of slasher movies because she thought they were misogynistic. But then another feminist ended up directed it, and she didn't know that it was supposed to be a parody, so she kind of shot it straight, and it ended up being just about the best slasher that has ever existed. It's so
That is
good.
so interesting. I need to see that.
Yeah,
That's
well,
right up
that
my
just shot,
alley.
like, right up on my little
maybe
list.
like let me ask you, how are y'all feeling? Were you tired? Do you want to go home? Well, we could put it on the movie.
Oh my God, I probably my bedtime's 11:30.
Okay.
You're lucky I made it here.
All right, so we will put that on, but yeah, Slumber Party Master. That's a very, very good one. What about y'all? What are some of your favorites?
Okay, so I have Scream.
Which we're gonna see in the movie theater.
Yeah, they're
in
doing
a
like
week
an
and a half.
anniversary.
Oh, cool. I actually was able to see it in theaters when it came out. I was in high school when it came out. Perfect time for me. It was the greatest. It was the greatest.
I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on my favorite horror movies when it's.
Well, I
my
mean, you
favorite
love
genre.
Jennifer's Body, which is kind of
I
more
don't
of a
really
niche.
count that.
I've
It's
heard.
spooky.
I want to watch it because I
sweet.
like the director.
Diablo Cody, right?
Well,
Did you-
Diablo Cody
wrote it.
Oh,
It was
okay. But it's my all-time favorite movie ever. It has been since 2010, and feminist, amazing, great.
Yeah. Karen
it.
Kusama directed. She also did a short on. What is it? The movie is called XX, and it's all like a horror anthology of just all women directors, and she did
cool.
one that was very good. I think she also did a movie about a cult in Los Angeles, which was another very, very good.
Oh, It Follows.
Yeah.
Oh, It
is
Follows.
pretty
Yeah.
good.
One of my faves too. I had a list too, and now I'm like, I can't remember any.
Oh,
of
The
them.
Invitation. Invitation is a very good Karen Kusama movie about
Oh
a cult.
yeah, that
Very-
one's on Netflix. I
Yeah,
think.
it's on Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah. I like The Wailing.
The Wailing. I've heard that one.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's one of the best movies I've ever seen. Honestly, it's so good.
Oh, Korean.
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
Korean
yeah,
horror film.
yeah. I have this on my list. Yeah.
It is so good.
I've heard many good things.
I've been
about
trying to get
this.
so many people to watch it, but it's like 2.5 hours long. Harrison's like, I could sit through that.
Oh, I've heard a lot of good things about that one.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm trying to think of others. I did an episode last Halloween on Spooky Show of like my top favorite scary movies, and I know It Follows was on there, and Scream, and that's all I can think of.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Harrison, what are your favorite horror movies?
Me? Well, I'm not a particularly big like horror movie person, but I'm gonna go to two kind of weird out movies. One of them is Houseu. Do you know that movie?
Yes.
Yeah. That's like a kind of weird out, very kind of spooky movie. And then this is, I think, gonna be a hot take, but I really like Drag Me to Hell. I think it's a fucking truly bizarre movie, and I like that it. People think it's like bad.
Well, isn't it like purposefully bad?
It's a I mean, it's definitely campy for sure.
Yeah.
Like, you know, a goat like comes to life at a seance and chats.
I don't like Drag Me. I don't like comedy horror, but
Okay, cool,
the
cool.
ending is good. The ending is
Yeah.
good. I really like the ending. I wish the whole movie had the tone of the ending, because I think I like Evil Dead 1 more than Evil Dead 2.
Oh, I
and
like Evil Dead a lot.
Yeah, I like the first Evil Dead. I like Sam Raimi when he's like really like serious and dark, because he's quite fucked up. But he's just like a kind of he likes the humor more. I think.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of like whimsy within that film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I had another one in my head that I thought you liked, and now I can't remember what it was. Oh, Devil. The one where they're stuck in the elevator.
You're
We
stuck
were
with
just
the-
talking
M.
about
Night
M. Night. We were
Shyamalan.
talking about M. Night Shyamalan with my friend, and we were talking about all the ridiculous concepts. We were talking about that. We were talking about.
And I brought up The Visit. Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah, I've seen The Visit,
and
yeah.
you never seen where
I've
the
never
old
seen
people.
that.
It was so funny. It's
I-
so wild.
I liked The Visit. Have you seen The Taking of Deborah Logan?
Yes.
I thought that was really good too.
Yeah, that was scary. Like,
Oh yeah.
actually, scary movies. Obviously, I'm like,
Yeah, it was this.
Try Me.
Yeah, the
That was
taking of Deborah Logan. Very, very good.
Yeah.
It's fucking about this. I mean, she's beautiful, but she's an older woman, and it's just like she's very scary in this.
she's very scary. Are you gonna pull up a pic of what? Oh my god.
Oh God.
Oh yeah. Let me see.
This looks spooky as hell.
Yeah, you would
probably-
not like this one.
No.
I'll get it up for the streamers.
Yeah, y'all got to see this.
Yeah, this is a spooky lady for sure.
This is a spooky lady.
Oh yeah. All right.
Bring her up.
There we go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And she gets like progressively like worse throughout the movie, like looks.
Oh man, it's such a freaky movie. It's such a freaky movie, and it gets weirder as time goes on. Definitely. I think I'm gonna add that to the list. I don't think I've had that on any of the lists taken of Deborah Logan. You will be on our list.
What else did you watch? The Lodge?
The Lodge? No.
It's a new one. It came out last year. It was okay. I don't know. I
The
forget who was in it. I think that's what it was called.
You know, I had that on my list. I never got around to it. I
Yeah,
think
it
it's
was
on
okay.
Hulu. Hulu keeps putting out these horror movies. I never watch any of them. I wonder if they're any good. They always put out like 10 a year. I never get around to it.
I feel like you get recommended a lot of those on TikTok. Like you're always picking up horror movie recommendations.
I'm on like
from there.
horror movie TikTok. They're like, you need to watch this, and this one really scared me, and whatever. I don't really like gore that much, so I'm a little picky. Although, like slashers don't. That gore does not scare me.
Well, all right. So we've been talking for about an hour, 45 minutes.
Well, heck yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, time flies.
The time flies when you're podcasting for real. Where can people find y'all? Where can people tell people about Spooky Show.
Yeah, so it's called Spooky Show, and I call it the Spooky Show in the history of the universe, in the world of life, and Harrison's on it.
Yeah, that's correct.
And we put out an episode every Monday, and it's not just true crime. We do we do everything spooky. So we do conspiracy theories. We do horror films sometimes. I haven't done one of those in a bit. We do dark history. We do paranormal stories. So basically everything spooky.
Anything spooky.
So you can find that on all podcast apps. And then the Instagram for that is at Spooky Show Pod. And then my personal stuff, I am at Bubbling Queen everywhere. On every app. BUBBLINE Queen.
Heck yeah. And I'm on social media at H HAARRIISSOON. My band just put out a record, if I can plug that real quick.
Oh, hell yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so my band Baseball Hat, we just put out a record called Send This to Your Crush. It's out everywhere now. So wherever you stream music and stuff, that's it's pretty neat. And yeah, and we also stream on Twitch. We stream twitch.tv/mindsugar. Kate and I stream along with our roommate John on that channel all the times. So yeah, check that out.
All right.
And thank you, Leslie. Seriously, thanks
Yeah,
so much for
thank you.
having
This
us.
was
man.
Thank you so much for
great.
coming over. This is really wonderful. Let me see. I'm gonna pull up your music video and then I'll let that close us out.
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, that full that's a little like clip, but there's a full video
Oh,
if you scroll down just a touch.
I'm doing bad at clicking.
No, that's
I'm
okay.
doing
If we go
bad.
down a little bit farther, there's there we go. There's the music video.
All right.
And that has some
Oh, I'm on that one
yeah,
too.
that has some
Oh,
spoken word
cool.
from Kate. So that's
Yeah.
a cool way to take us out.
Cool. All right. Let me make sure that's playing.